Hi, I'm Rick Reef. Welcome to SoCal Insider. Well, it's a new year, and while Washington is still stuck on what, if anything, to do about immigration, California's forging ahead. But is the state going too far to accommodate undocumented residents? Well, for instance, letting them become lawyers? Also, LA County Sheriff Lee Baca resigns amidst a jail scandal and trying to explain how so many bad apples got hired as deputies. And Anaheim Latino groups are claiming victory as the city agrees to let voters decide how they'll elect their council members. Joining me to discuss, reporter for MundoFox 22, Anabel Munoz, and SoCal Insider's own peerless reporter, David Nazar. Anabel, great to have you back. Happy New Year. David, likewise. Always a pleasure. All right, so David, let's start with Lee Baca. I mean, what a fall from grace. One of the most powerful politicians in Los Angeles, the sheriff of LA County, has resigned because of the controversies that he was facing. And 2 years ago, the reports really began to surface. And David, you visited both the ACLU and the Sheriff's Department and went to Men's Central Jail for a report.
California says there must be reform within the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and its jail system, namely Men's Central Jail and the Twin Towers Correctional Facility. Lawyers for the ACLU continue to argue there's been a widespread pattern of unspeakable acts of violence against inmates. The ACLU says Sheriff Lee Baca and the department have allowed deputies to go unpunished, concealed their behavior from the public, and for years made no effort to fix a broken system. ACLU Legal Director Peter Eliasberg says this is not a recent phenomenon either.
1997, the United States Department of Justice concluded that there was a problem with abuse of the mentally ill in the jails. In 2005, the special counsel to the Board of Supervisors for oversight of the Sheriff's Department said that there was, horrible and lax supervision of deputies in Men's Central Jail. In 2006, the captain of Men's Central Jail reported to the then assistant sheriff, now undersheriff, that there was a problem with deputy gangs and deputy abuse in Men's Central Jail, and he proposed a solution to that problem, and he was shortly thereafter transferred out of his post.
Eliasberg says this pattern of abuse continued in 2008. The ACLU says there was a problem with physical abuse of the mentally ill within the jail system. And then, 2 years later, more documented problems.
In 2010, we put out 2 reports detailing a number of different statements by prisoners detailing physical abuse. In 2011, we put out a report that had 70 different incidents on it.
And David, even after that report, many more revelations, many more problems. The LA Times doing a lot of reporting on this, and then the newer revelations about the Sheriff's Department violating its own procedures, hiring as deputies guys that had criminal records, work violations, on. And yet, Baca was the incumbent. He was giving every indication he was going to run again. People were reluctant. Two candidates were in the race, including one that we had on recently. But really, it looked like he was going to go ahead. What caused him to change his mind?
Well, first of all, the bit of the history is, as you both know, it's like Teflon Don. Everything seemed to bounce off him. And when I did that report, I'm sure when Anabel covered these stories, it was deny, deny, deny. You cannot get an answer out of Lee Baca. And from some of the insiders at the Sheriff's Department, Rick, that I spoke with, it's sad to say, and I hate to put it this way, but we don't pull any punches here. They say he was either an idiot and stupid, he did not know what was going on with his underlings beneath him, or he was corrupt and turned a blind eye. Many I talked to say it's a combination of all the above. This didn't begin yesterday. This didn't begin last month. You saw in my report from some time back there was a litany and a progression of how this all happened. But remember, when Sheriff Sherman Block was sheriff back in the 90s, this was a heralded department. They had great policies, great procedures. It was really the prototype and the model for sheriff's departments across the country. Well, Baca takes over in, I believe, 98, and by the early 2000s, he starts taking away some of those policies that had been put in place to have oversight, to take care of both the department and the civilians at large. And all of a sudden you see the abuse in the jails. And it was the ACLU that really started uncovering a lot of this. As you mentioned, the LA Times did extraordinary work, but the ACLU due diligently had many attorneys working on this. Chaplains were saying that the mentally ill were being abused, that other inmates were being abused. And of course, they denied this every time. And when you talk to Lee Baca, it's hard to gauge him because he's a nice, decent guy. He's soft-spoken. It seemed like he wanted to affect change. But yet anytime you mention something to him, well, I didn't know about it. I didn't know that was going on. And then his own spokespeople would say, the ACLU is making a big deal out of it. They've got their own agenda. Well, obviously that has not been the case.
That obviously was not the case when just recently 18 of his deputies were indicted for what they did in the jail. Interestingly, though, he wasn't, which means to say that he was corrupt, as David laid out the possibilities, maybe doesn't fit. Stupid guy, I don't think so. So maybe in the middle you've got he just was out of touch. He didn't know what was going on. He didn't have a good feel for some of the mid-managers in his department. What's your take on this, Anabel?
Well, I definitely know that there is talk that he might be indicted, and that may be why he is deciding to retire right now from an immigrant community perspective.
Maybe cutting a deal with the FBI that if he retires, maybe he doesn't get charged?
I don't know if that's the case, right?
But that's speculation, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. And I know from an immigrants' rights advocate's perspective, we've seen him under a lot of pressure for the way they handle the impounding of vehicles of undocumented drivers. He's been under a lot of pressure for that. They've asked him constantly to apply a policy that is similar to Special Order 7 with LAPD. They've accused his deputies of discriminatory remarks, of very bad treatment of undocumented immigrants during these routine traffic stops. So I don't know that they're necessarily celebrating this, but I know that it is a sort of relief in that aspect.
How much should we make of his comments that he just made as he announced his resignation, that he's doing this for the good of the department, that 99.9% of the deputies are good, and that he's doing this for the sake of the department?
He also said that he is doing this for very personal reasons, so I think that there is a lot behind this decision that he's making, and it was very interesting that he did say that his deputies have conducted themselves with the utmost integrity when the accusations are really the contrary, and not speaking of each one of them, but generally speaking.
Yeah.
Look, it's a sad story all the way around. Anytime law enforcement faces scandal or you say they're quote unquote corrupt, I mean, it's just human nature. We do hold our law enforcement officers to a higher standard. They are the people we entrust for our safety and civil protection and protection of our streets and our homes. So there is maybe a double standard that we want them to be better than, say, people in other places of employment. The problem is that you've got to remember, this guy is 72 years old. He was probably going to get plastered in a campaign. We had on a few weeks ago, former deputy Bob Olmsted. Now, he was the guy that basically blew the whistle on the whole jail situation he's running. I believe Assistant Sheriff Terry McDonald is now going to take over in place of Baca. But as you say, there is speculation that he had to have cut some sort of deal to escape time behind bars and say, you know what, get out now. But what a terrible legacy to leave. I mean, we had in Orange County, Sheriff Mike Corona under indictment and corruption charges and all the witness tampering. He's doing time behind bars. Now we've got it in Los Angeles, and
but you can see though the power of incumbency. That there were two candidates that were in the race. One, Tanaka, his former
Paul Tanaka.
Paul Tanaka, his former right hand, and then Bob Olmsted. Within minutes of him announcing that he was resigning, there's like 4 more guys running. It's unbelievable, but nobody wanted to go up against him. I wonder, there had been some talk that maybe he was having trouble raising money too for the first time, that because of what was going on. Anyway, Anabel, wanted to ask you about the new immigration laws. California has put a lot of laws into effect that really ease the restrictions on undocumented residents, including maybe there's a new term we're going to be hearing now, undocumented lawyer. What's going on?
Well, it has been an eventful, I think, 2013 for undocumented immigrants, specifically in the state of California, while we wait for Washington to do something on an immigration reform. But the California Supreme Court just voted at the beginning of the month unanimously to grant a law license to Sergio Garcia. And as you both know, he's an undocumented immigrant who arrived in the United States when he was only about 7 or 8 years old, and he is the the son of farm workers. He actually has a pending application for his permanent residency, which is still on hold. I think he's been waiting for about 15 years, but he challenged a 1996 law that basically prohibits the government from granting a professional license to an undocumented immigrant. He passed the bar exam on his first try. He actually got the license. He was sworn in, and then 2 weeks later they said, you know what, never mind. So huge victory for him and other future undocumented attorneys.
It raises some interesting issues, though, doesn't it? I mean, what if he's in court and the prosecutor, he's just, I don't know what kind of an attorney he is, but, you know, let's say the prosecutor's losing. He says, arrest that guy. He's an illegal. Let's take him out of the, you know, country.
Well, I would hope that his colleagues wouldn't say something like that, but he's on his way to receiving his permanent residency. He's a very special case.
I was joking a little, but there are some issues here about, you know, the law. And I mean, in a way, is there anything to citizenship? Aren't there certain things that you only do if you're a citizen?
Of course there are issues with the law, and of course folks who have not been given that opportunity and have done it the legal way are going to be, frankly, irate about this. But also this makes a statement. Not every Latino person is a day laborer. Not every Latino person is a gardener. It just goes to show if you give folks a helping hand, they can do something. And this is the whole point of some of the ideology in California with political lawmakers, that if you embrace Latinos and it's about inclusion rather than exclusion, they will rise to the surface of being doctors and lawyers and accountants. And that's the argument made, that they need a chance. Don't pigeonhole them into the fact that everybody's a day laborer and they're an illegal.
And that's definitely what Sergio Garcia said to me when I spoke to him after this decision, is he feels that California is really rewarding hard work and setting an example for the rest of the country. And that comes along with many other laws that are going into effect this year. One of them, the Trust Act, which was pushed through several times. I know Governor Brown vetoed it the first time around, but it essentially prohibits local law enforcement from basically fulfilling ICE requests to place holds on undocumented immigrants when they are not convicted of a serious crime. So it kind of limits what's happening with deportations with programs like Secure Communities.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, we're seeing this in whether it's marijuana use and many other things where states are really becoming laboratories for things. And in California, it's in the forefront of dealing with immigration and basically saying the old rules don't apply here. You know, they're not working, and we have to accommodate the fact that we have a huge citizenry here, which is here and not going away.
Right.
Wanted to ask you about another story, also involving largely Latinos, and that's Covered California. That's the Obamacare in California. And while we've been hearing that it's doing much better in California relative to much of the rest of the country, there are some problems, particularly something you might call a Latino problem. David, what's this about?
Well, I'd say there are more than some problems. There's some major problems, as both of you know. I have a great source on this, Louise McCarthy. She's the president and CEO of the Community Clinic Association of Los Angeles. This is an agency that has about 50 nonprofits, 200 clinic sites all throughout Southern California, impoverished, mainly Latino and Black communities. They serve about 1 million patients. Okay, so here's what she says. First of all, McCarthy is saying that Covered California is a success because if it helps one person, there you go. I don't know if you can agree with that, because the Latino base is really what's going to save Obamacare and Covered California in this state. Without the Latino base, they're done in California. Covered is done. Unfortunately, in the first month, enrollment was only about 3%. Now, maybe at best, Latino enrollment is up to about 5%. McCarthy, I asked her, why is it so low? And she gave me a few examples. She's saying, look, first of all, there's a fear factor with mixed status families. So in other words, let's say the husband is a legal citizen, but his wife is undocumented or an illegal alien, and he's supposed to fill out a form online with his family members. Well, the last thing he's going to do is fill that out because he doesn't want his wife or a family member to be deported. So that's number one. Number two, you've got all of these counselors and intake folks who are trying to help the Latino community get signed up. Unfortunately, half of them don't even speak Spanish. They're not bilingual. The system itself, the website, you can't facilitate it, you can't broker it, you can't navigate it. And then one of the most important things, a lot of this Latino population, they're young, they're healthy, they're strong, they've never had health insurance, they don't know what a Blue Cross card is or a Prudential card or a Blue Shield card is. They don't need insurance. So when they call and get this 1-hour spiel by these counselors, they're like, you know what, I don't need it. And if you've never had it and you don't feel you need it, they're thinking, well, why am I paying into the system? I'm young and I'm healthy. And again, if it's something you've never been presented with, you feel you don't need it. So that's a major problem.
In terms of numbers, how many undocumented, or not undocumented, sorry, I'm going back to the last discussion. How many uninsured are there in California?
Well, that's a good question. There's about, in total, I want to say 7 million uninsured folks in California.
And
60% of them are Latino, and you would guess that they'd be the first people running in line to get enrolled, and they're not. They're not buying into this.
Yeah, Anabel, that's interesting because I think the assumption they're the first in line means that they're the ones that will benefit from Obamacare, because much of the discussion is we want young people to sign up because frankly, they're the ones that aren't going to necessarily benefit from this. They're going to have to pay. But that covers a lot of Latinos too, that they need them in because Latinos will be paying in rather than taking out.
Well, something the administration is also stressing is that the deadline really isn't until March. They still have some time. I know that us Latinos have a history of waiting until the last minute, so I think that also plays a little bit of a role, getting a little bit of a push right before it's that very last day to sign up.
So just when the website starts working, all the Latinos are going to come on, it's going to crash again.
They're just taking their time, making sure things are working out. No, that's definitely true, and I think that for a lot of Latinos whose first and maybe only language is Spanish, they really like that face-to-face contact when they're going to do something so important. There's so many options. There's the bronze, the silver, the platinum, different deductibles. I mean, there's just so many different options that they really need someone who's going to sit with them in their language and explain this, and we know that they don't have as many representatives.
Well, I'm getting a feeling the Latinos are not the only ones that are being confused by all of this. Okay.
You know, the funny thing, by the way, that Louise McCarthy, again, the president CEO of the Clinic Association, told me, she said, look, we're doing better than most of the red states that didn't opt into this, but I don't really know if that's saying much because we're not doing very well here in California.
I think right now the standard is if it helps one person, it's good. That's pretty much the baseline right now. Okay, David, in Anaheim, there has been this ongoing problem with the mayor fighting with the city council and over many things. And one of the big issues has been how to elect council members. The majority of the council members resisted efforts by Latino groups to go to what's most places have, which is districts. Anaheim's the biggest city in the state that still elects council members at large. The ACLU has scored a big victory. What's that about?
I mean, a huge victory. Again, district-based voting, as you put it, simply breaking up the city into districts whereby you give, in this case in Anaheim, you have a huge Latino population. You give them just a better voice. You give them better representation. You have someone specifically from that district monitoring what's going on, and then they can take those issues to City Hall and address those issues. And as you're seeing the video, this is just from a few minutes ago, a huge press conference and a big win for Mayor Tom Tate, because he was the guy that told the council, who was vehemently against him, look, I'm not saying at large or district one or the other is better, but the right thing to do is go to district-based voting, because we must put infrastructure and support not only into the Disney resort and not only into the area where quote-unquote white folks live in Anaheim Hills and around Disney, but in these Latino communities. And he had a huge fight on his hands. That's Jose Moreno over there, one of the Latino activists. It was the case Moreno versus City of Anaheim. It was these Latino activists that brought this case against the city, and there was so much resistance. And basically,
what's the deal now?
The deal now is that the ACLU settled. Unfortunately, Anaheim is on the hook for about $2 million. And Mayor Tate said, look, we don't want any part of this from the beginning. He said, we need to go to district-based voting. We're going to owe them a ton of money. So now they pay the ACLU their charges. And what is going on is, firstly, November of 2014, on the ballot, voters will now have the chance to decide if they want district-based voting, and I'm sure they are going to vote for that. And secondly, they're talking, the other thing on the ballot is about expanding the city council from 5 members to 7 members. In other words, just having a couple extra folks in these districts to give more representation.
Actually, isn't it 6? What they're going to do is they're going to have, instead of having 4 at-large council members and an at-large mayor,
that's right,
you'll have an at-large mayor and 6 districts.
That's right.
All right.
Okay. So technically 4 to 6, 5 to 7.
Anabel, this culminates a lot of resentment and simmering anger, if you will, in Anaheim, which was triggered a number of months back, maybe a year back or so, when a couple of suspected gang members were shot in like successive days or something by Anaheim police. That caused protests and a lot of feeling of disenfranchisement in the Latino community.
Definitely. I was there when the riots were happening during the coming days after those 2 officer-involved shootings. And although there was a lot of frustration over the deaths of these 2 individuals, there was also a lot of frustration because of the lack of a political voice that many of the Latino community members felt they didn't have at the time. And they actually, I remember, were asking for 8 districts originally. So I think they're also compromising a little bit with 6.
Yeah. I think the tragic thing in this entire story is that, you may have mentioned it a bit earlier, every big city in California does district-based voting for the simple reason that the ACLU has won every lawsuit in this case. Cities were violating the California Voting Rights Act. And even Mayor Tom Tate in my story said there is a possibility we could be breaking the law. He saw this from the beginning. He stood on a rooftop and screamed. No one would listen to him. Fellow council person Chris Murray proposed what was called residency-based districts as part of the settlement. They said that's not constitutional. Get into all that,
I mean, that was just it was a delaying tactic, really.
The point is that there was a panel that said we need to go to district-based voting. It didn't have to turn out to be this.
Having said, I think that Anaheim has always seen itself as kind of a big, small city, that we're all in it together and that they like that idea. But, you know, times change, and the reality is for many of the citizens of Anaheim, the current system didn't seem to be working, and now they have something different. Just quickly, let's touch on something else, David. The cross is back in the LA County seal. Some people probably don't even know that LA County has a seal, but there's many little pictures there, and for many years there was a cross kind of floating over the Holiday Bowl, almost a Fellini type of thing. But anyways, when they changed the seal because of pressure from people who didn't want the cross there, they replaced it with the mission of one of the
San Gabriel mission.
San Gabriel mission, and there's no cross on it. And
Which
David, isn't it just historical accuracy and and let's face it, that's part of the legacy of California was the missionaries who came over here. And so now they've put the cross back on a divided 3-2 vote. Lots of controversy, church and state, all that kind of stuff. What do you make of it?
So you're saying that I can't advocate for a Jewish star on there? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Well, David, if you want to go there, I actually checked it out. A lot of nations have crosses on their flag. Israel has a Star of David on a prayer shawl, you know, and there are the Islamic crescents all over the place on flags. So what's the big deal?
Look,
Little tiny cross?
Rick, it's not a big deal. I am not prude with regards to religious freedom. Even as a Jew, I love when people tell me Merry Christmas. More power to folks who celebrate Christmas. I love Christmas. You know, my Muslim friends, good Ramadan. This political correctness, as you will, where we have to say Happy Holidays. I mean, that's gone crazy. And even as a Jew, I think that's insane. No, we have Christmas, Merry Christmas. With regards to the cross, though, Rick, look, there does need to be some separation between church and state. It can be offensive to some people who are not Christian. I mean, I don't take huge offense to it, but with all the problems going on in LA County, these two supervisors are concerned about putting a cross on a seal. I mean, when there are potholes in the streets, when there's traffic, when there's with a budget mess, when there's pensions, and I'm worried about a cross. No, I don't care about a cross.
David, we are out of time. Anabel, you break the tie. Who's right here?
I can't.
All right,
I think it's even for now. We'll continue next time.
It's even. We shall see. You can watch this show and past shows at rickreef.com. Segments of the show can also be viewed at pbssocal.org. My guests have been Anabel Munoz and David Nazar. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on SoCal Insider.
SoCal Insider with Rick Reef is brought to you by the following. 5 Point Communities is a proud sponsor of PBS SoCal. 5 Point Communities is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. More information available at www.5pointcommunities.com. Snell and Wilmer is a full-service business law firm with more than 400 attorneys in Orange County, Los Angeles, and throughout the West. On the web at swlaw.com. Snell and Wilmer. Straight talk, sound counsel. Practical solutions.
Relief Pod's latest generation of safety kits now go everywhere you go. Relief Pod's organized, color-coded, and compact safety kits keep first aid and emergency items accessible for a safe lifestyle every day. Relief Pod. Live ready.
A healthy future for you, your family, and your business is why Memorial Care Health System transformed healthcare. Our hospitals, physicians, and outpatient centers keep patients healthy and care for them when they're not. Memorial Care, one healthcare system leading the way.
Stem cells are showing great promise for the treatment of disease and injury. At UC Irvine, innovations in stem cell research are rapidly moving potential therapies from the lab to the patient.